Hello everybody and welcome to our review for the college algebra homeworks. We are just going to go through the various homework assignments and we are going to go through how to go about solving them. So if you have not done so already, I highly recommend that everybody please try to do this on your own first. It really doesn't help much if you just watch me do it for you. So I'm going to hope that everybody has already done this, and this is kind of to review it. We're also providing some answer keys and all that, but this will hopefully be a little bit more useful. Now, the first one is extremely basic, really not even about algebra, really about basic arithmetic review, a little bit of PEMDAS. And in the first couple of questions, I asked you to do this without a calculator. Essentially, the way to do something like this, like 17 minus 22, whenever you have a subtraction of a number that is greater than the number that is the base for the subtraction, you still need to subtract the smaller one from the larger one, but the sign is going to be a negative. So, for example, in 17 minus 22, you actually do 22 minus 17, and that of course is 5, but because the bigger sign is the negative one, your answer is going to be negative 5. And obviously if you do this on a calculator, it works very simply. But let's try something like this. Let's try 54 minus 87. Now 87 minus 54 is 33, because 7 minus 4 is 3, and 8 minus 5 is 3, so it's 33 overall. But again, since the bigger number is on the negative side, so your answer is going to be negative 33. You know, if, for example, you had negative 54 minus 87, well then, since both were negatives, you add them together, and your answer is going to be negative as well. So the answer to this one, of course, would be, well, 11 plus 130 is 141, and so it would be negative 141. If you do something a little bit different, you do a multi-part. Since there's no multiplication over here and there's no real PEMDAS to worry about, there's no real order of operations, you just do them one at a time. If there were multiplication or exponents or parentheses, you'd have to worry about this order of operations, but you don't have to worry about that in this case because they're all plus or minus operations, and addition and subtraction operations are really the exact same thing in just different forms. You can just do them one at a time. So negative 23 plus 14. Again, the bigger sign is negative, the smaller is positive. So subtract and use the sign from the bigger one. So you do 23 minus 14, which is 9. And since the 23 is negative, this becomes negative 9. Minus 16, well, this is negative 9 minus 16, so they're both being added to the negative side, so you add them. 16 plus 9 is 25, so you get to be negative 25, so we can make this as negative 25. Negative 25 plus 5. Now here again, you're going to have, there are different signs, negative 25 plus 5, so you're going to have to subtract, so it's 20, but the sign was on the negative, so this would be negative 20 altogether. And then you've got negative 8, minus 7, minus 20, minus 8, minus 7. Basically just add them all up and the answer is negative. And so your final answer is going to be negative 35. Okay, now let's get to the middle ones as we move a little bit further along in the complexity of the first homework over here. And here we are going to use PEMDAS. Now, see, if you'll recall, PEMDAS was the order of operations. The first thing is the thing inside the parentheses. The second thing is whatever exponents there might be. Then you've got MD, which stands for multiplication and division, and since multiplication and division are the exact same thing, just in opposite forms, there is no, you can do division first, you can do multiplication first, it makes no difference. And then finally, you've got AS for addition and subtraction, and again, you can do those in any order you like. Okay, now in this case, we've got no operations are within the parentheses. There's a 17 in these parentheses, but actually there is one operation over here within the parentheses, so that's the one we're going to do first. And the one we're going to do first over here within the parentheses is the square root, that's the symbol for square root of 64. And for that we are going to use 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. So we're going to make that into an 8. Let me make this a little thicker so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so we've got an 8. Now we've got one more, we have no more operations within the parentheses, but we do have an exponent, and that is 2 to the third power. 2 to the third power is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So we can put an 8 here, leave the 17 in parentheses, minus 3 times 8. Now, we've got no more operations within the parentheses, so now we can look at, okay, we've got two multiplications, 8 times 17 and 3 times 8, and we've got one subtraction, which is this function over here. So let's do the multiplications first. Then it makes no difference which multiplication we do first, but let's go left to right. 8 times 17, which is 136, and again, the way I did that in my head is 8 times 7 is 56, and 8 times 10 is 80, so 80 plus 56 is 136. And then we can do this multiplication. Leave the minus sign there because we haven't operated it yet. 3 times 8 is 24. Now we've only got one operation left, and that's subtraction, which is 136 minus 24, which of course is 112. And there is your answer. The next one we can do in the same way. Here we do have a couple of operations within the parentheses, so that's the ones we want to do first. 17 minus 3, we'll change that into a 14. 14 minus 6, we'll change that into an 8. Now, we've only got two operations left, 14 times 8 and then the minus 22. The multiplication and division one comes first, so we're going to do the multiplication first, and that's 8 times 14, which is 112, minus 22, only one operation left, 112 minus 22, which is 90. For number 6, it's a little bit more complicated, but still nothing too bad. We've got operations within the parentheses, but even within the parentheses, we've got different types of operations. For example, within this parentheses on the left side over here, we've got an exponent. So let's do that first, because PEMDAS applies within the parentheses as well. So let's do 3 squared first, which is 9. So that leaves us 10 plus 59 minus 9 divided by 24 minus 4. Now, the only things we have left are operations within the parentheses. 10 plus 59 is 69, minus 9, of course, is 60, divided by 24 minus 4, which is 20. And remember, we did the subtraction and the addition before the division because they were inside of the parentheses. And you want to do operations within the parentheses first. So we did these operations first within this parentheses, then this operation second. Now we've only got one operation left, which is 60 divided by 20, which is 3. And now to the last 4 problems of this particular homework. And number 7 is, again, order of operations, actually something that's a lot simpler than the one that we just looked at a little while ago. You've got no parentheses here. The only thing you have is 3 operations, a multiplication operation, a division operation, and an addition operation. And from PEMDAS, we know that we do multiplication and division first. You can do either one first. You can do 16 times 15 and then divide the whole thing by 5, or you can do 15 divided by 5 and then multiply that by 16. Either way is fine. I'm going to do the division first because that just deals with smaller numbers and makes things a little bit easier, but you could do 16 times 15 first. That's perfectly fine. 15 divided by 5 is 3. So we will make this 16 times 3 plus 12. Now, of course, we do the multiplication first, which is 16 times 3, which is 48. And 48 plus 12 equals 60. Now we go to number 8. And number 8, notice we do this time have parentheses, and we have an exponent. But when we're talking about PEMDAS, the first thing we do is the operations within the parentheses. So let's do within this parentheses first. 9 plus 33 is 42. 42 minus 6 is 36. So let's take 24 still, 36 in parentheses, and that means multiplication. Whenever you have a parentheses next to something else, that means multiplication, divided by 6 minus 3 squared. Now the 3 squared is the next operation because we've got no more operations left within parentheses. So we'll make 3 squared into 9. And now we've got a multiplication and a division. This is the multiplication function over here. This is the division function over here, and this is the subtraction function over here. And just like we did before with number 7, we can either do 24 times 36 divided by 6, or we can do 36 divided by 6 and then multiply by 24. I'm going to do the latter again because when you do the division first, you end up dealing with smaller numbers. But either one is going to get you the correct answer. So I'm going to leave the 24 here. 36 divided by 6 is 6. So I'm going to multiply by 6 minus 9. Then we can do 24 times 6, which is 144. And 144 minus 9 is 135. And that is our answer. Number 9 is similar. Here we've got operations within parentheses and we've got exponents. So let's do the operations within the parentheses first. And within the parentheses first, we will do the division first, because there's division within parentheses. So let's leave the 6 plus 3 squared over here while we do this one, plus 9, and we'll do 10 divided by 5, which is 2. So we'll put 9 minus 2 over here. Okay. Now we can do the operations within the parentheses. 6 plus 3 is 9, and that's still squared. Plus 9 minus 2 is 7. You could put it in or out of parentheses. It makes no difference. Now we've got an addition function and we've got an exponent function. So of course we do the exponent function first because exponent is well ahead of addition and subtraction. 9 squared is 9 times 9, which is 63. 63 plus 7 is 70, and that is your answer. And finally, number 10, again, we've got an operation in the parentheses. We've got two exponents operations. This one and this one, a square root, is also an exponent. And for this one, it is a little bit more complicated. So let's try the operation in parentheses first. So let's say 3 times negative 16 plus, and we'll do 6 minus 3 first, 3 to the negative third. Okay, so first of all, on the left side, so now we've got two exponent functions. We've got the square root of negative 16 function, and we've got 3 to the negative third function. Now, as hopefully you remember, when you have the square root of a negative number, that is the same thing as having an imaginary number. There is no such thing as the square root of a negative number. There is no number times itself that will give you a negative number. It's not negative 4, for example, because negative 4 times negative 4 is going to give you positive 16. So whenever you have the square root of a negative number, you have to separate out an I. I meaning the square root of negative 1, which stands for imaginary number. So for this section, we'll put it over here to give it a little bit more room. 3 times the square root of negative 16 plus 3 to the negative third. Negative 6, the square root of negative 16 is the same thing as the square root of positive 16 times I. If you think about it, square root of negative 16 is the same thing as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of positive 16. So this then becomes an I, that's what I means. I means the square root of negative 1. So we can change this into 3 times the square root of positive 16 times I, and the square root of positive 16 is 4, so that becomes 3 times 4 times I, and 3 times 4 is 12, so the left side becomes 12I, and over here, again, hopefully you'll recall that a negative power means 1 over whatever that power is. So for example, 4 to the negative 2 is the same thing as 1 over 4 to the 2, which is the same thing as 1 over 16. Over here, so this is the same thing as 1 over 3 to the third. Now 3 to the third we know is 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27 altogether. So this is the same thing as 1 over 27. And so our final answer is 12I plus 1 over 27. Now there's no way you can break this up because this has an I and this one doesn't. So, I'm sorry, you cannot combine these. And so therefore this is your final answer. 12I plus 1 over 27. And the last two of the homework, which I didn't see before, but now I do, so I'm going to go over the last two sections over here, are very similar. And that is, first of all, as we discussed before, a negative exponent means the same thing as 1 over that exponent. A fractional exponent, like 1/2 or 1/4, means a root. So for example, 16 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as the square root of 16, which of course is the same thing as 4. Now, so in this case, again, we're going to start with PEMDAS. We've got two exponents, this and this. but we've got something in parentheses first, so this becomes a 16. So we've got 3 to the negative 1/4 times 16 to the 1/2. Okay, we can do either exponent first. It makes no difference. 3 to the negative 1/4 is the same thing as 1 over the 4th root of 3. I'll put 3 over here, and I'll put a 4th root over here. That's the same thing as the 4th root of 3, which is the same thing as 3 to the 1/4 power. Now, what this number is exactly, I'm not 100% sure. It's going to be somewhere between less than 2, but you'd have to, it would be some irrational number, some number that goes on forever, which you just look it up on a calculator or Google it or something. But we don't necessarily have to worry about that because we can leave it in an irrational number. You can leave it in that form. For example, if you have the square root of 17, you can just usually leave it in that form. It's an irrational number. It's not a whole number, so you can just leave it the way it is. On the right side, we've got 16 to the 1/2 power, which is the square root of 16. Remember, this is the same thing as the square root of 16, which is 4. So this becomes 4. And two terms next to each other are multiplication. So really the best way to write this would be 1 times 4, which is 4, divided by the 4th root of 3. Doesn't look like a very elegant answer, but this is the best answer that you can come up with. And finally, we've got something that should be hopefully relatively easy because it's easier than some of the other ones we've seen in this homework so far. Let's do the functions in the parentheses first. So let's do 123 minus 23, which is 10 to the 1/2 power, plus 57 minus 12, and we'll do what's in here again first because it's within the parentheses. 1 minus 3, which is negative 2. Now we can start doing the other functions. Exponents are first, which is 100, excuse me, 100 to the 1/2 power. 123 minus 23 is 100. So we've got 100 to the 1/2 power, which is the same thing, of course, as the square root of 100. And the square root of 100 is 10, plus 57. And now we can do the multiplication. And multiplication, we can do negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. Or we could just do minus 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4, which is minus negative 4, which is also positive 4. Either way, you get positive 4. Once you have this, well, now you've only got 3 operations. They're all addition. 10 plus 57 is 67, plus 4 is 71. And that's all for homework number 1. I will see you in homework number 2.